Lena had everything most people could only dream of. A grand mansion overlooking the city, designer clothes hanging in rows inside her walk-in closet, and a husband, Daniel, who everyone believed was deeply in love with her. To the world, they were the perfect couple, the kind who smiled at charity galas and traveled to breathtaking destinations hand in hand. But behind those picture-perfect smiles, Lena felt an emptiness she could no longer ignore. There were nights when she sat by the window of their luxurious bedroom, staring at the lights outside, wondering when her husband had stopped looking at her the way he used to. Daniel was charming and polite, but his warmth had grown cold, his affection mechanical, as if he was going through the motions of love without feeling it anymore. He spent hours buried in business calls, meetings, and dinners with people who praised him for being the man married to a rich heiress. When Lena tried to talk to him, he would smile distractedly, tell her not to worry, and then rush out again, leaving behind only the faint smell of his cologne. She told herself it was just stress, that every marriage went through rough patches. But something about his distant eyes kept haunting her. He used to notice every small thing about her, a new dress, a different hairstyle, even the way her laugh changed when she was nervous. Now, he barely noticed if she was in the same room. Their dinners had once been filled with laughter, stories, and shared dreams, but now, silence sat between them like an uninvited guest. Lena would ask about his day, but Daniel's answers were short, his attention fixed more on his phone than her. He spoke more about his company's future than theirs. Even when they traveled together, he seemed more interested in business opportunities than sunsets or quiet moments. On social media, they still looked perfect, his arm around her waist, both smiling at flashing cameras, but those smiles were practiced, not felt. Deep inside, Lena knew something had changed. She noticed how he flinched slightly when she reached for his hand, or how quickly he left the room when she tried to talk about their feelings. It wasn't just distance, it was detachment. He had begun treating her less like a wife and more like a trophy, something to display, not cherish. Her friends often told her how lucky she was to have such a successful husband, and she would nod, forcing a polite smile while her heart quietly sank. At night, when Daniel fell asleep beside her, without even a goodnight kiss, she would stare at the ceiling, tears silently slipping down her face. She remembered the early days of their relationship, the flowers he brought her, the long walks, the laughter that once echoed through their small apartment before they inherited her family's fortune. Back then, they had nothing but love, and that had been enough. But ever since money entered their lives, Daniel seemed to have changed. His tone, his priorities. Even the way he spoke about her, it was as if wealth had built a wall between their hearts. Lena began to question everything she thought she knew about love. Was he still the man she fell for, or had greed quietly replaced his affection? She started noticing small signs, the way his eyes lingered on their bank statements, the excitement in his voice when investors praised her family's name, and the growing impatience whenever she expressed insecurity. He never said anything cruel, but his indifference hurt more than words ever could. Sometimes she wished he would at least argue with her, show some emotion, anything that proved he still cared. But Daniel remained calm, detached, and strangely satisfied, as if her feelings were nothing more than background noise in his perfectly controlled world. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the glass walls of their home, Lena sat across from Daniel at dinner. He was scrolling through his phone while she pushed her untouched food around the plate. She finally asked the question that had been burning in her chest. "Do you still love me, Daniel?" He didn't even look up. "Of course I do," he said quickly, his tone flat and distant. That was the moment Lena felt something break inside her. His answer wasn't cruel. It was empty, emotionless, and it told her everything she needed to know. That night, when Daniel left for another meeting, Lena stayed awake for hours, her mind spinning. Maybe love wasn't what she thought it was. Maybe all the grand gestures and expensive gifts had blinded her from seeing the truth. that her husband's heart no longer belonged to her. She looked at their wedding photo on the bedside table and whispered to herself, "If love is real, it should survive, even without money." And as the rain fell harder outside, she made a silent promise, one that would soon test everything she believed about love, loyalty, and truth. Lena could no longer live with the doubt eating away at her heart. Every smile Daniel gave her felt rehearsed, every word carefully measured. She needed to know if he truly loved her, not her beauty, not her money, but her. One sleepless night, while staring at the ceiling, an idea formed in her mind. It was dangerous, perhaps even cruel, but it was the only way to see his true heart. With the help of a trusted doctor and her family's silent support, she decided to stage an accident. The plan was simple. She would fake a car crash and pretend she had lost all movement from the waist down. The doctor agreed to play along, ensuring everything looked real. When the news reached Daniel, he rushed to the hospital, his face pale with shock. Lena, lying in the bed with tubes and bandages, watched him closely. His first words were filled with concern. He held her hand, kissed her forehead, and promised he would never leave her side. For a moment, hope flickered inside her. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe he still cared. In the beginning, Daniel was everything a loving husband should be. He brought her flowers, stayed beside her bed, and even postponed some meetings to be with her. He told her not to worry about anything, that he would take care of her no matter what. But deep down, Lena noticed something. His smile didn't reach his eyes. When the nurses came in to change her bandages or adjust her wheelchair, Daniel looked away, uncomfortable. He didn't like seeing her like that. The first week passed with his steady presence, but by the second week, his visits became shorter. He started taking more phone calls, stepping out of the room for important meetings. When he came back, he would always look distracted, sometimes even impatient. "You need rest," he would say with a soft voice, but it felt like he couldn't wait to leave. Lena kept silent, watching, feeling her heart grow heavier each day. Soon, his absences became longer. He began arriving late, leaving early. The flowers stopped coming. The warm smiles faded. When she asked him about work, he sighed heavily, as if her questions were burdens. "You don't understand how much pressure I'm under," he'd say, before walking out. A few days later, one of the nurses mentioned seeing Daniel at a high-end restaurant, laughing, dressed in a sharp suit, clearly enjoying himself. Lena's chest tightened as she tried to hide her tears. She told herself, maybe it was just business, but her heart whispered otherwise. The man who once couldn't bear to leave her side now seemed relieved to be away. Weeks passed, and Daniel's excuses grew. He claimed to have back-to-back meetings, then said he had to travel for work. When he finally returned, his visits lasted no more than a few minutes. He would pat her hand, check his watch, and promise to come back soon. Promises that meant nothing anymore. Sometimes, he wouldn't come at all. He sent his assistant with flowers and cards. Never personal, always formal. The staff at the hospital began noticing it too. They spoke kindly to Lena, feeling sorry for her, though none dared to tell her what they whispered behind her back, that her husband had. Already moved on emotionally, Lena sat in her wheelchair by the window, watching the sunlight fade through the hospital glass, and wondered when his love had truly died. It wasn't the accident that broke him, it was the inconvenience. Her disability had stripped away the glamour, the beauty, the luxury, and revealed the raw truth beneath their marriage. Without her elegance, she was no longer his prize. He didn't see a wife in need. He saw a burden. And as that realization sank in, Lena's chest felt hollow. Her test was working, but the truth was far more painful than she imagined. Still, she kept up the act. Every time Daniel came, she smiled weakly, thanked him for his time, and said nothing about her pain. She wanted to see how far he would go before his mask finally fell. It didn't take long. One evening, she overheard him outside her room, talking to someone on the phone. His voice was low, but sharp. "I can't keep doing this," he said. "She's not the same anymore. I'll figure something out soon." That one sentence cut deeper than any wound. Lena turned her face toward the window, her eyes glistening but dry. Her heart had broken quietly, without a sound. By the time Daniel left that night, she knew the truth. He didn't love her anymore. He loved the version of her that glittered, that moved gracefully in expensive dresses, that made him look powerful. But the woman in the wheelchair, she no longer fit into his perfect world. The test had done its job, but at a cost she hadn't expected, the loss of the illusion she had built her marriage upon. Yet beneath her sadness, a new strength began to form, because while Daniel's love had proven false, the truth she had uncovered would soon lead her to something real, something far deeper than she ever thought she would find. The nights at the hospital had grown long and painfully silent for Lena. The days blurred together, the quiet hum of machines, the distant chatter of nurses, and the faint scent of antiseptic in the air. Daniel's visits had become rare, and even when he did appear, he was distant and distracted. Once he left, the room felt colder, emptier than before. Most of the staff treated her with polite professionalism, careful but detached. They saw her as the wealthy patient from the top floor, not as a woman quietly breaking inside. One night, as she sat staring out of the window, lost in her thoughts, the sound of a mop rolling across the floor broke the silence. A tall man wearing a faded blue uniform stepped into her room, humming softly to himself. He looked up, surprised to see her awake. "Didn't mean to disturb you, ma'am," he said kindly, his voice warm and calm. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You're not disturbing me. It's nice to hear another voice." That was the first time Lena spoke to Mr. Sam, the hospital's night janitor. He was an older man, his hair touched with gray, and his hands rough from years of work. But there was something gentle about him, a kindness that didn't feel forced. Each night after that, he would stop by her room during his rounds. Sometimes he would tell her small jokes about the day, about the stubborn mop that refused to listen, or how a nurse had mistaken his cleaning cart for a food trolley. His humor was simple, but real, and for the first time in weeks, Lena found herself laughing, even if just for a moment. Unlike the doctors or visitors who tiptoed around her condition, Mr. Sam never treated her like she was fragile. He spoke to her like a friend, not a patient. When he noticed she liked flowers, he began bringing small ones from the hospital garden, daisies, lilies, sometimes wildflowers tucked in his pocket. "They're not fancy," he'd say, placing them in a cup of water beside her bed, "but they're alive, and that's what matters." Lena began to look forward to his visits. During the day, she would watch the clock, waiting for night to come, not for sleep, but for the familiar sound of his mop wheels rolling down the hall. He would listen to her when she spoke about her fears, her doubts, even her loneliness. Unlike Daniel, he didn't rush her or pretend to understand everything. He simply listened, nodding gently, his eyes soft with understanding. Sometimes he shared his own stories about his late wife, who used to plant roses behind their small house, about his daughter studying to become a nurse, about how he had learned to find joy even in small moments. His life wasn't filled with riches, but his words carried a quiet strength that money could never buy. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, something inside Lena began to heal. The sadness in her eyes softened, replaced by a fragile light of hope. She started smiling more, asking the nurses how their day was, even helping the staff with small tasks from her wheelchair. Mr. Sam's friendship had stirred something. Deep within her, a reminder that kindness still existed in unexpected places. There were moments when she wondered why he cared so much. She had nothing to offer him, no wealth, no influence, yet he treated her like someone who mattered. That realization touched her deeply. One evening, as they talked, she asked him, "Why do you always stop by my room? I'm sure you have other work to do." He smiled, pausing as he leaned on his mop. Because, ma'am, sometimes people just need to be reminded that they're still human, not a patient. Not a number, not a name on a file. Just a person. His words lingered in the air, simple yet powerful. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't from pain, they were from gratitude. The friendship between them grew quietly, away from the world's eyes. While Daniel continued to drift further, this humble janitor, with his warm heart and kind soul, had unknowingly filled the empty spaces Daniel had left behind. Lena began to see life differently, not through wealth or status, but through small moments of connection, compassion, and sincerity. Every night, when Mr. Sam left, he would say, "Rest well, ma'am. Tomorrow's another day." And every morning, Lena woke up with a little more strength, a little more courage to face the truth about her life. She no longer waited for Daniel's calls or visits. Instead, she looked forward to moments that made her feel alive again. The laughter, the stories, the flowers from the garden. What started as a chance meeting between a lonely heiress and a janitor had become a quiet friendship that touched her soul. For the first time in a long while, Lena didn't feel invisible. Mr. Sam saw her, not as a burden, not as a patient in a wheelchair, but simply as herself. And though she didn't yet realize it, this unexpected friendship was about to teach her what love, compassion, and humanity truly meant. The morning light crept softly into Lena's hospital room, painting everything in shades of gold, but there was no peace in her heart. She had started to regain her strength emotionally, at least thanks to Mr. Sam's kindness, but the weight of her secret still pressed on her chest like a stone. She had planned to continue the act for a few more days, to be absolutely certain about Daniel's heart. Yet, fate revealed the truth sooner than she expected. As she sat near the half-opened door, adjusting the blanket over her legs, she heard a familiar voice in the hallway. It was Daniel. His tone was sharp, irritated, nothing like the soft-spoken husband she had once known. "You don't understand," he said to someone on the phone, his voice dripping with frustration. "This situation has destroyed my life. I can't go anywhere without people pitying me. She's helpless, and I'm stuck pretending everything's fine. I can't live like this forever." His words hit Lena like thunder. Her heart stopped, and for a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The man who once promised to stand by her no matter what now spoke as if she were a burden. She covered her mouth, afraid a sob might escape and give her away. When Daniel's voice faded down the corridor, Lena sat frozen, tears streaming silently down her face. Every doubt she had ever buried now screamed the truth. He had never loved her, at least, not the real her. His affection was tied to the illusion of beauty, luxury, and power. Now that she appeared broken, he saw her as a weight dragging him down. That night, she didn't eat. She didn't even turn on the light. The moonlight through the window illuminated her face, pale and wet with tears. She had never felt so small, so unwanted. When the door creaked open quietly, she thought it was a nurse. But it was Mr. Sam, holding his mop and a small cup of chamomile tea. He looked at her for a moment and immediately noticed her red eyes. "You've been crying," he said softly, setting the cup on the bedside table. Lena tried to smile, but her voice trembled. "I heard something I wasn't meant to hear." She didn't explain at first, but he didn't press her. Instead, he pulled up a chair beside her and sat down, hands resting calmly on his knees. After a long silence, she whispered, "He doesn't love me." He said, "I ruined his life." Mr. Sam looked at her, his expression filled with quiet understanding. Then, in his steady, humble voice, he said something that stayed with her forever. "Love isn't proven by comfort. It's proven by who stays when life gets hard." His words were simple, but they carried more truth than any promise Daniel had ever made. Lena wiped her tears, looking at him as if seeing the world for the first time. There was no pity in his eyes, no judgment, just honesty and compassion. That night, long after he left, Lena couldn't sleep. His words kept echoing in her mind, slowly turning her pain into clarity. She realized that love wasn't about status or perfect appearances. Real love showed itself in struggle, not ease. And with that realization, she knew it was time to end the lie once and for all. The next morning, the hospital felt unusually quiet. When Daniel arrived, dressed in his expensive suit and carrying his phone, as always, Lena's face was calm, almost peaceful. "Daniel," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." He looked up from his screen, slightly annoyed. "What is it?" "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. She took a deep breath. "I can walk," she said, her voice steady. For a moment, silence filled the room. Daniel frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Without another word, Lena pushed her wheelchair back, placed her hands on the armrests, and slowly stood up. The sound of the wheels rolling back echoed in the room like thunder. Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief as she took a careful step forward, then another. "It was a test," she continued. "I needed to know if you still loved me when I had nothing to give." His face turned red, a mix of shock and fury flashing across it. "You lied to me," he shouted, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea what this has done to my reputation?" Lena flinched but stayed strong. "I did it to find the truth," she said quietly, "and now I have it." Daniel shook his head, his jaw tight. "You've lost your mind, Lena," he said bitterly. "You humiliated me." He grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door, his words cutting like knives. "You wanted the truth. Here it is. I don't love you anymore. I haven't for a long time." The door slammed behind him, leaving behind a heavy silence. Lena stood there for a long time, her body trembling, but her heart oddly calm. She had lost a husband, yes, but she had finally gained the truth. The weight she had carried for months seemed to lift off her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt free from lies, free from pretending, free to start over. As she sat back down, she noticed the small cup of chamomile tea Mr. Sam had left the night before, still warm, still comforting, like the words of the man who had shown her what real care looked like. And in that quiet moment, Lena realized something beautiful. Sometimes, losing false love is the first step to finding something real. The days after Daniel's departure felt strangely calm for Lena, like the silence that comes after a long storm. The pain of betrayal still lingered in her heart, but it no longer crushed her. Instead, it reminded her that she had survived something powerful, something that had changed her forever. For the first time in a long while, she didn't wake up wondering what Daniel thought of her, or whether she was enough. She woke up wondering how she could make the day meaningful. She continued to visit the hospital, not as a patient, but as a helper. The same corridors that once echoed with her fear now carried her footsteps, filled with purpose. She spent hours sitting beside patients who had no visitors, listening to their stories, holding their hands, and sharing small smiles that meant more than words could say. Her presence became a quiet light in a place filled with sorrow. Nurses began to notice the change in her, often saying, "Miss Lena, you bring calm wherever you go." She would just smile softly, knowing that calm had come from facing her truth. Mr. Sam, the janitor who had once mopped the floors near her bed, remained her closest friend. Every morning, she found him cleaning the same hallway, humming old songs with his usual gentle smile. One day she brought him a small cup of tea, the same way he once had for her. He laughed softly, saying, "I see you're stealing my habit." But she shook her head, replying, "No, I'm continuing your kindness." They shared quiet moments like that, often no grand words, no drama, just small gestures that spoke of real care. He became the brother she never had, a reminder that true friends can appear from the most unexpected corners of life. Lena often wondered how she would have survived those dark days without him. She admired how he carried himself with dignity, despite his simple job and worn clothes. To her, he was proof that goodness didn't need wealth or power, it only needed a heart. Though she had exposed Daniel's selfishness, Lena never wished him harm. She knew anger would only chain her to the past. Instead, she chose forgiveness not for him, but for herself. Forgiveness gave her peace, and peace gave her strength. With that strength, she began to dream again. She started a small support group at the hospital for patients struggling emotionally, calling it the New Beginning. Every week, she would sit with them in the hospital garden, under the wide sky, sharing stories about hope, trust, and healing. Her words came not from books, but from experience, from pain transformed into wisdom. "You are not what happened to you," she would tell them softly. "You are what you become after it." Those who heard her often left smiling, touched by her quiet courage. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Lena walked to the hospital garden, the same place where she had once cried alone. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and she could hear faint laughter from the children's ward nearby. She sat on a wooden bench, watching the world bathed in soft light. Mr. Sam approached from a distance, wiping his hands on his apron, and waved. She waved back, her smile calm and warm. For a moment, she closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face. It no longer felt like the end of something painful, it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. She had lost everything she once thought she needed, yet she had found something far greater: peace, honesty, and a heart open to real love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lena whispered to herself, "I'm finally free." And she meant it. Free from lies, free from doubt, free from the need to be perfect. She no longer needed luxury to feel rich, or someone's approval to feel worthy. Her wealth now lay in the people she helped, the kindness she received, and the love she gave, without expecting anything in return. The garden lights flickered on, glowing softly like stars. She smiled, knowing this was her life now, simple, sincere, and full of quiet beauty. Somewhere behind her, Mr. Sam's voice called gently, "It's getting dark. Miss Lena, let's go inside." She turned, her eyes shining. "Just one more minute," she said, watching the last trace of sunlight disappear. In that moment, Lena felt something she had never felt before, not just happiness, but peace that ran deep into her soul. And as she stood to leave, her heart whispered the truth she had finally learned. Love doesn't live in luxury or grand gestures, it lives in compassion, patience, and sincerity. And with that, Lena stepped forward into her new beginning, carrying with her a heart healed by honesty and touched forever by kindness.